All right, let's talk about one of the most powerful and, let's be honest, controversial technologies we've ever invented, the nuclear reactor. We're going to crack open this incredible machine and see what makes it tick, from its surprisingly simple start to where it might be headed in the future.
So, why do we even bother with this stuff? Well, it all comes down to this one number. A single kilogram of the uranium that fuels these reactors has the same energy as 120,000 kilograms of coal. I mean, that's just a staggering amount of power packed into a tiny space. It's the whole reason we're having this conversation.
So what is a nuclear reactor really? You can think of it as a machine that's built to safely manage a very specific kind of fire, an atomic one. It controls what's called a self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction. Basically, splitting one atom kicks off a domino effect, splitting more and more atoms and releasing a truly enormous amount of energy. The reactor's whole job is to keep that reaction humming along, not too fast, not too slow, but just right.
Okay, so let's pop the hood on this atomic fireplace. How do you get from splitting a microscopic atom to powering your TV? Well, the physics gets pretty deep, but the basic idea is actually surprisingly straightforward. It really just boils down to these 4 steps. First, you have fission. A tiny particle, a neutron, smacks into a uranium atom and splits it apart. That releases a burst of energy and a couple more neutrons. Those new neutrons then zip off and split other atoms, and boom, you've got a chain reaction. All that energy creates a ton of heat. That heat is used to boil water, creating a massive amount of high-pressure steam. And that last step, it's the same as any old power plant. That steam blasts against a turbine, spinning it like a pinwheel to power a generator and make electricity. What's wild is how fast we went from just figuring this out to building a global industry. The origin story is pretty incredible. It starts in a lab and then moves to, well, a literal pile of bricks that ended up changing the world. Just look at this timeline. In 1938, it's just a theory. A mere 4 years later, right in the middle of World War II, the first working reactor is a reality. And only 12 years after that, a nuclear plant is powering homes and businesses. The pace of this innovation was just mind-boggling. And this really shows you just how humble the beginnings were. The world's first reactor wasn't some gleaming, complicated machine. Nope. It was built under the bleachers of a football stadium in Chicago. It was literally a pile of wood beams and graphite bricks with chunks of uranium stuck inside. I mean, they called it Chicago Pile 1 for a reason. But this simple stack of stuff proved it could be done. A controlled chain reaction was possible. Now, from that first pile of bricks, the technology has exploded into all kinds of different designs. A modern nuclear reactor isn't just one thing. There's a whole fleet of different types out there, each with its own special way of harnessing that atomic energy. The vast majority of reactors in the world, something like 90%, are either pressurized water reactors or boiling water reactors. These are the tried and true workhorses. But you've also got other cool designs, like the PWR, which uses a special kind of heavy water that lets it run on natural uranium without any extra processing. And then you have the really futuristic stuff, like molten salt reactors, which are a whole new ballgame and a super hot topic for researchers right now. And that leads us to one of the biggest what-ifs in the nuclear world, the thorium question. For years, you've heard people talk it up as a safer, cleaner, and more abundant alternative to uranium. So, is it really the fuel of the future? And this is the heart of the debate. Geologically, there's way more thorium in the Earth's crust than uranium. So on paper, it seems like a no-brainer, right? If there's so much more of it, why on earth did we build a whole global industry around the rarer element? The case for thorium is pretty compelling. I mean, listen to this quote. Its incredible abundance could basically solve our fuel needs for millions of years. It's a promise of a future with a practically endless supply of clean energy fuel. But of course, there's another side to the story. The catch with thorium is that it can't start a chain reaction all by itself. You have to first turn it to a specific type of uranium inside the reactor. And that whole process, that neutron dance, is complicated. And right now, it's just flat out more expensive than digging up the uranium that we already know how to use. So here's the kicker. Uranium didn't become the standard because it was the quote-unquote best fuel. It won because of a mix of history, politics, and cold, hard cash. The early nuclear programs were all about military needs, and they needed plutonium for bombs, something you only get from uranium reactors. Plus, we already had a huge uranium mining industry.
Once all the money and infrastructure was poured into uranium reactors, switching to something totally new was just too massive of an undertaking.
Of course, you can't talk about nuclear power without addressing the elephant in the room, safety. The incredible power locked inside the atom comes with some pretty serious risks, and a few huge accidents have completely shaped how the public sees this technology. There have been 3 major accidents that are just burned into our collective memory. 3 Mile Island in the US, which was a partial meltdown that caused a lot of panic but actually released very little radiation. Then the absolute catastrophe at Chernobyl, which was the result of a terrible reactor design and a lot of human error. And more recently, the Fukushima disaster in Japan, triggered by a massive earthquake and tsunami. These events are absolutely central to the story of nuclear safety. Now, here's a pretty startling take on Fukushima. While the event was an absolute disaster that forced thousands from their homes, this source points out a really important detail. Even when it was hit by natural disasters way beyond anything it was designed for, the number of direct deaths from the reactor's radiation was 0. It just shows how complicated it is to really assess nuclear risk and to separate the consequences of the event from the direct impact of the reactor itself. So, with all those risks, where does nuclear stand today? Well, it provides about 9% of all the electricity in the world. To give you some context, renewables are now up to 30%. Together, they make up the lion's share of our low-carbon power, which shows that nuclear still plays a really significant role in the global energy mix. So, what's next for nuclear? Well, engineers are learning from the past and are working on a whole new generation of reactors. The goal is to make them fundamentally safer and more efficient. So, what's coming down the pike? There are 2 big ideas getting a lot of attention. First, you have small modular reactors, or SMRs. The idea here is to build smaller reactors in a factory and then ship them to a site. In theory, this could make them way cheaper and faster to build. Then you have what's called Generation 4 reactors. This includes designs like those molten salt reactors we talked about. And the big goal for these new designs is to make a major accident physically impossible, to design reactors that can cool themselves down and shut off automatically with no human help needed. And that brings us to the big, final question. We have this atomic fireplace, a technology with undeniable risks, but also a proven track record of generating huge amounts of power with 0 carbon emissions. As we face down a growing climate crisis, we have a really critical choice to make about what role, if any, this technology will play in our future. What's the right path forward? Honestly, that's a question we all have to weigh.